Whoa, the YNW Melly trial saga just took another wild twist, huh? The fact that he's breaking his silence now after months of quiet definitely makes you wonder what's really up behind those courtroom doors. Here's the thing. Whenever someone holds back their story for so long and suddenly decides to speak, it usually means either they've got new evidence, a change in legal strategy, or maybe even a last-ditch effort to influence public opinion before the verdict. The allegations, in this case, are heavy, first-degree murder charges linked to the deaths of two close friends. With rumors swirling about the night's events and conflicting stories about whether it was a shootout or an internal dispute, Melly speaking up now could potentially shift how people see the case or even sway the jury. And those leaked phone calls or footage you mentioned. That's the kind of thing that could be a game changer if it sheds light on the timeline or contradicts previous testimonies. Honestly, this case is one of the most polarizing in recent hip-hop history, mixing legal drama, emotional turmoil, and fan loyalty in a way that keeps everyone on edge. What part of the trial, or more specifically Melly's recent revelations, caught the public most off guard? Honestly, take your pick. From surprise witness statements to courtroom theatrics, this case has been nothing short of a real-life crime thriller, unfolding scene by scene in front of millions. But if we're talking about standout moments, Melly's sudden shift in tone during recent testimony has people buzzing. Gone was the cocky, unshaken persona that once defined him. In its place stood someone visibly shaken, talking not just about legal strategy, but about betrayal, trust, and the deep psychological toll this ordeal has taken. His emotional breakdown, while describing how close friends allegedly turned on him, that was a pivotal moment. It was raw, unscripted, and felt human. That's what has fans and critics alike asking the big question. Is Melly finally turning a corner, or is this just another calculated move? On one hand, some believe this is genuine, maybe even the first honest glimpse of a young man unraveling under the weight of fame, accusations, and the fear of losing everything. On the other hand, skeptics argue this could just be courtroom theatrics, a last-ditch attempt to sway the jury's emotions and paint himself as the misunderstood victim in a story that spiraled out of his control. What complicates everything is the murky gray area this trial lives in. You've got betrayal layered with greed, friendships twisted by money and fame, and families torn apart by both grief and loyalty. The courtroom isn't just a place for facts in this case. It's a stage where emotions, reputations, and public's perception collide. Prosecutors are painting Melly as cold and calculated. His defense, however, is leaning hard into the narrative of a young man caught in a whirlwind of manipulation and deceit. And as all this plays out, the world watches like it's the latest binge-worthy docuseries. Only this one's real. Lives are on the line. And no matter where you stand on Melly's guilt or innocence, one thing's clear. This isn't just about whether he walks free. It's about whether redemption, reputation, and reality can survive under this kind of spotlight. So can he turn it around? Maybe. But if he does, it won't be because of strategy. It'll be because the truth, whatever it is, finally breaks through the performance. The prosecution's strategy has been relentless, painting YNW Melly not just as a troubled artist, but as someone who coldly calculated the deaths of his closest friends for personal gain. They're pushing the idea that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment tragedy, but a premeditated move fueled by jealousy, control, and most chillingly, money. That image, of a young chart-climbing rapper turning on his day ones, is jarring, especially for fans who watched Melly rise from Florida's underground scene to national recognition. It's a betrayal narrative that doesn't just target the crime, it shatters the mythos around his music and persona. But the defense isn't backing down. Their approach is layered and emotionally charged. They've worked hard to reframe Melly as a product of his environment, someone raised in instability, exposed to trauma early, and thrust into the pressures of fame before he was ready. They argue that what the prosecution calls motive is actually the product of misinterpretation, media bias, and a broken system that's been eager to villainize young black men in hip-hop. When the defense pokes holes in the evidence, pointing to questionable forensic links, contradictory timelines, and witnesses whose credibility is shaky at best, it forces people to pause. Suddenly, the case doesn't feel like a cut-and-dried conviction. It feels murky, layered, and dangerously complicated. That's what makes this trial feel more like a morality play than a legal proceeding. It's not just about guilt or innocence. It's about who gets to tell the story and which version people believe. The prosecution wants jurors to see a monster in disguise. The defense wants them to see a broken young man trying to survive. The spotlight. And the public? They're caught in the middle, trying to reconcile the artist they love with the allegations they're hearing. No matter the verdict, the impact will linger. For Melly, it's his life and legacy on the line. For fans, it's a reckoning with the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the people behind the music we vibe to might be hiding something far darker than a catchy hook. Plus, courtroom drama. With cameras and reporters just amps up the tension. It's like everyone's watching a real-life thriller unfold. What's your take? Do you feel the prosecution has a strong case? Or do you think Melly's defense could actually pull off a win here? That kind of cryptic statement from YNW Melly is really fascinating. It almost feels like a strategic move. In high-profile trials like this, sometimes staying mysterious or vague can be a way to keep the opposition and the public off balance, or it could be a calculated effort to shift the narrative without fully committing to one side. His silence for so long then, choosing now to speak but without a clear confession or denial, makes it all the more suspenseful. It leaves people wondering if he's trying to hint at something deeper, or maybe signaling that there's more to come. This whole trial seems like it's not just about the facts of the case anymore, but also about controlling perception, managing public opinion, and psychological warfare in the courtroom. Do you think Melly's silence and cryptic message will work in his favor? Or is it just making people more suspicious? The prosecution's timeline, once presented as rock solid, began to show visible cracks under scrutiny. The defense wasted no time calling out inconsistencies, pointing to gaps in the sequence of events, unanswered questions about travel routes, and missing timestamps that didn't align with phone records. More importantly, they challenged the so-called smoking gun evidence, the text messages. According to them, those texts weren't proof of guilt. They were vague, open to interpretation, and potentially doctored or misrepresented. The insinuation was clear. In an era of digital manipulation and partial leaks, context is everything, and this case lacked it. They hammered home one major point. Melly was either being set up or swept up in a rush to judgment. From flimsy forensic claims to unreliable witness testimony, the defense painted a picture of a young man caught in a storm of circumstantial evidence, all while prosecutors tried to build a narrative strong enough to sway public opinion and a jury desperate for clarity. It wasn't just a defense, it was a counterattack, designed to make the jury question everything they thought they knew. Inside the courtroom, the energy was thick with tension. Each new revelation, whether a photo, a timestamp, or a phone, ping, was met with murmurs, side eyes, and subtle shifts in the jury's demeanor. You could practically feel the weight of it all. 2 lives lost, a third in limbo, and a sea of fans watching from the outside, hoping for justice but unsure of what that even means anymore. The jurors weren't just assessing facts. They were carrying the emotional weight of a case that had blurred the line between fame and tragedy. And that emotional pressure wasn't just limited to the jury. As families sat just feet apart, some grieving, others defending, the human cost of the trial never left the room. This wasn't just about Melly's fate. It was about lost futures, broken trust, and a music industry forced to confront yet another of its rising stars imploding under the weight of allegations that, true or not, will leave a permanent scar. The truth? Still buried under layers of doubt. But in that courtroom, every pause, every objection, and every piece of contested evidence only made the silence between facts louder. Public opinion also remained deeply divided. Some saw the new evidence as the nail in the coffin for YNW Melly, while others rallied behind him, convinced he was a scapegoat for a flawed system. With Melly's recent cryptic statement and the defense's aggressive challenges, it feels like the trial is heading toward a dramatic crescendo. The question now is whether the jury will see enough reasonable doubt or if the prosecution's case will finally tip the scales. What do you think? Are you leaning toward Melly's innocence or guilt after all these twists? and commentators seized. On every moment, breaking down testimonies, scrutinizing body language, and spinning theories in real time. The trial became a lightning rod for larger conversations about justice, race, and the criminal system's treatment of young Black men. Some saw it as yet another example of a talented artist being crushed by circumstances beyond his control, while others viewed it as a necessary reckoning for alleged violent behavior. In the midst of the chaos, both sides doubled down, the prosecution pushing for a conviction with what they framed as a compelling mosaic of evidence, and the defense fighting tooth and nail to dismantle each claim, sow doubt, and humanize YNW Melly as a flawed but not guilty man. As the trial nears its climax and witnesses leave the stand, the courtroom feels less like a space for resolution, and more like a pressure cooker ready to blow. The jury sits at the center of it all, tasked with untangling a case that's anything but clear-cut. The evidence is conflicting, the narrative's polarizing, and every testimony seems to spark more doubt than clarity. This isn't just a legal battle, it's emotional warfare, and the jury's verdict will echo far beyond the courtroom. If you're following closely, the defense seems to be gaining ground, not necessarily because they've proved Melly's innocence, but because they've successfully planted seeds of doubt. They've dissected the prosecution's timeline, challenged the forensics, and highlighted the unreliability of digital evidence in a world where manipulation is easy and context is king. Add in the emotional angle, Melly's youth, his troubled past, his shaky mental state, and suddenly the picture gets murky. The jury doesn't just have to decide if he did it, but whether the state has proven it without a shadow of a doubt. And right now, that doubt is very real. The prosecution, to their credit, has pushed a compelling story. They've painted Melly as calculated and motivated by control, status, and financial gain. But while their narrative is gripping, their hard evidence hasn't landed with the same weight. Much of it is circumstantial or open to multiple interpretations, exactly the type of material that makes a guilty verdict hard to reach in a high-stakes criminal trial. Meanwhile, public opinion is playing its own role, both inside and outside the courtroom. On social media, fans are divided, some fiercely defending Melly, others demanding accountability. This split mirrors the tension inside the trial itself. Jurors may be instructed to avoid outside noise, but let's be real, the cultural impact of this case is impossible to fully block out. The memes, the commentary, the constant stream of updates all shape how the story is perceived. In many ways, this trial isn't just about facts, it's a battle for the narrative. So who has the stronger case? Legally, the defense is doing what they need to do, raise doubt. Emotionally, the prosecution still holds weight. But when facts are fuzzy and emotions run high, it's not about who tells the better story. It's about who tells the one the poor jury is willing to believe, stood firm, highlighting the cracks in the prosecution's story and the human complexity behind their client. Outside, social media was ablaze. Memes, deep dives, and heated debates flooded timelines. Fans and critics alike were glued to every update, weighing in with fervor. The sealed document revelation, suggesting witness manipulation, became the latest wildfire, fueling claims that the trial was less about truth and more about power. Plays behind the scenes. Some argued it exposed systemic flaws. Others saw it as a last-ditch defense tactic. Meanwhile, the mental health angle sparked conversations beyond the courtroom, shining a light on the pressures artists face behind the glitz and fame. Was this a call for empathy or a strategic move to soften the narrative? Probably both. The trial's next chapters promised more drama, and the world watched, waiting for answers that might never come cleanly. Do you think the mental health defense will sway the jury, or will the new evidence about witness tampering overshadow everything and re-examine the ballistic trajectories with accurate physics? The shots couldn't have come from the locations they claimed. This testimony cast serious doubt on the timeline and sequence of events the prosecution had presented. The defense also questioned the chain of custody on critical pieces of evidence, suggesting potential tampering or contamination. If the evidence can't be trusted, how can you convict based on it? Their lead attorney challenged. Meanwhile, Melly himself remained mostly silent, watching the proceedings with a steely gaze. When questioned directly about the contradictions, in the prosecution's case, he offered only measured, calculated responses, never fully exonerating himself, but never admitting guilt either. His cryptic demeanor kept the courtroom guessing. The jury, clearly fatigued but attentive, absorbed every detail. The room was tense. Every new revelation felt like a bombshell, shifting the narrative yet again. Observers could sense the trial was reaching a critical crossroads where reasonable doubt might just tip the balance. As the session closed, legal analysts speculated whether the defense's dismantling of key evidence would be enough to save Melly from a potential conviction, or if the weight of circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies would ultimately prevail. What do you think will be the deciding factor in this case? The shaky forensic evidence or the emotional testimony from witnesses ever resort to violence? One longtime friend testified, "He's someone who's always been about the music and his family. I don't believe he's capable of this." Defense also emphasized Melly's mental health struggles, arguing that the years of stress, anxiety, and isolation had taken a toll on his ability to cope, which may have influenced his silence and behavior in court. Closing with a powerful plea, the lead defense attorney said, "This case is not just about the evidence. It's about reasonable doubt, about questioning the narrative pushed by the prosecution. Without the weapon, with witnesses now recanting, and with no clear motive, how can you condemn a man based on suspicion and pressure alone?" The courtroom was left in a charged silence, the jury now facing the weighty task of deciding a verdict where every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every doubt mattered. The trial has become not just a legal battle, but a clash between truth and perception. Where do you see this story heading? Will the defense's unraveling of evidence and witness credibility be enough to save Melly, or will the prosecution's narrative hold firm in the minds of the jury? Going all in, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury was now left to sift through a complex web of emotional testimonies, forensic evidence, disputed witness accounts, and conflicting narratives. The defense's appeal to doubt and humanity clashed sharply with the prosecution's detailed timeline and motive-driven argument. It was a classic battle: reason against suspicion, evidence against emotion, and uncertainty against conviction. Outside the courtroom, public opinion remained fiercely divided. Supporters of Melly rallied behind hashtags like #SourFreeMelly and shared heartfelt messages about his struggles and talent, while others echoed the prosecution's narrative, convinced the evidence spoke for itself. Ultimately, this case highlights more than just a legal dispute. It raises larger questions about justice in high-profile trials, the power of public perception, and the complexities of loyalty and betrayal within close-knit communities. Where do you think the jury will land? After hearing both sides, will Melly's silence and the defense's doubts outweigh the prosecution's narrative and evidence? The iceberg. The moment the verdict is announced will be a turning point, not just for YNW Melly and those directly involved, but for the wider conversation about justice, accountability, and the music industry's shadowy undercurrents. The jury side with the prosecution's detailed case, believing the evidence and motive paint a clear picture? Or will the defense's appeals to doubt, emotional testimony, and critiques of the evidence tip the scales toward acquittal? Whatever the outcome, the aftermath will ripple through fan communities, media outlets, and perhaps even inspire new conversations about how high-profile cases like this are handled in the public eye. Are you curious about how the verdict was received or what happened next? I can help break down the fallout, public reactions, or even potential next legal steps. That's a powerful wrap-up. It really captures the tension and stakes perfectly. It feels like you're setting the stage for a compelling, interactive discussion with your audience. If you want, I can help you polish it further or add some punchy hooks to boost engagement. Want me to?